Hello and welcome back to the channel. My name is Krashy, and today I've got a really interesting topic that kind of came out of nowhere, but I would love to share it with y'all and hear your thoughts. So drop a like on the video, get ready, gear up to type a comment in the comment section. Let's go ahead and dive into it. So Spraggles on Twitter posted a really fun tweet. I really like this one. He said, "Hit me with your unpopular Pokemon Unite opinions." And this is going to lead us fully into our discussion for today. Now, it's an older opinion that I've had in the past. I've kind of let it subside, and now it's kind of coming back to me, but it also poses a question. So this is what I said. I said, attackers literally shouldn't be capable of jungling. It's boring, steals a position from an otherwise meta mon, and overly feeds / free farms ADCs or AD carries like Duraludon, Cinderace, Greninja, and Decidueye. Now, this was an old opinion I used to have. I used to hate that attackers were in the jungle, and if I'm being completely honest, I'm still not a huge fan of it. But I want to talk a little bit about why. I want to pose the question of what do you think about this, and then I want to give some alternative perspective and give some thoughts about this whole thing as well. So first and foremost, I am really not a big fan of attackers in the jungle. I think that the biggest thing is that the jungle, when you look at it, the center position is free farm. It's farm that is mostly uncontested unless there's like invade strategies, but it's on your side, it's safe, it's free farm. It is mostly uncontested, it is more experienced in the lanes, and it is farm that is guaranteed for the person that you put it there. So when it comes to, basically looking at a character like Duraludon or Cinder, we're going to use the better AD carries for this example, Duraludon or Cinder versus that of even say something strong like a Charizard. It often makes a lot of sense that someone as strong as like the AD carries, who also scale really, really well into the late game, would want that farm. So for me, this opinion comes from a position of wanting to kind of increase the viability of certain roles or mons in the game, while also understanding that with the jungle, there's only one spot, right? It's 1/5 of the team, whereas there's 4 laners. And yeah, in solo queue, it's just 4 flat laners. You can basically play whatever you want. In 1-1-3 meta, like competitive meta, or just even competitive meta in general, it's not necessarily as free, but there's 4 laners essentially, and there's only 1 jungler. So it's a very contested role just inherently. But yeah, when it comes to playing a character like Cinderace, Duraludon, they scale incredibly well. So why wouldn't you give them not only the best farm, because it's the most farm and the most experience that you can get, but the farm that they don't have to fight over, right? Everybody should know that putting a character like Duraludon, Cinder, Greninja, Decidueye in the lane is not necessarily the best thing to do, although Duraludon is not that bad at it, but it's not the best thing to do. They don't really farm very well, and they would need a lot of help to get that farm. So again, my opinion comes from thinking about the curve of strength, right? How fast and how easy is it to curve them into getting a ton of strength? Now, there's an opposing opinion on this tweet, and I really like that this was brought up, especially by the person specifically, Indie Bear from GG Gaming Gladiators, one of the best teams in North America, said jungle is the role with the most diversity. I kind of agree that the best farm shouldn't be the safest, but I'm not sure I understand your argument. He said Cinderace, Greninja, Charizard, Dragonite, Gardevoir, Talonflame, Venusaur were literally the meta picks across the world. And I love that he brought that up because it's true. Depending on the region, the team comp, the way that the team plays, it's not that we're stuck in a position where the AD carries like Cinderace, for example, are 100% pick rate across the jungle. It's just that they're incredibly strong. And so in that regard, it's absolutely true. And I think the most important part of his tweet for me was saying that he says he kind of agrees that the best farm shouldn't be the safest. And that's basically him saying like the most farm is completely safe, and that's kind of not the best thing. So the alternative perspective and kind of the secondary thought behind this entire discussion is, well, maybe the farm in the jungle needs to be nerfed. And that is an idea that is kind of molded in my mind over time. Before, when I had this idea, it kind of turned into this newer idea about wanting to reduce the experience from the jungle. Now, it feels really cool to leave the jungle, have your level 5, evolve or get a new move, but I think that is too strong. Now, another thing that I was also too strong, and this is kind of the reason with, or kind of the issue with Cinderace and Duraludon and stuff like that in the jungle, is the red buff from Buffalot. The range, like auto attack, slows on range is really, really strong. So I would love to see them find a way to maybe nerf that slow on the ranged auto attacks. You make it like half as effective just because it's ranged and it's easier to get those attacks off as opposed to being melee. But again, I think that the experience in the jungle is incredibly high. So to kind of jump back a little bit, I'm a little scatterbrained. To jump back a little bit, my original thought was that I just don't really care for attackers in the jungle. I think that if you want to scale a character like Cinderace or Duraludon as well as they do into the late game, you should have to work for it, right? Imagine if the jungle was too hard. Don't even think about the execution of it, but if the jungle was basically incapable of being done by Cinderace, it just, you know, 1-to-1, it can't do it. Don't think about it. If you put that Cinderace in the lane, it would now be the responsibility of the Cinderace and of the lane partner or partners, depending on the meta, to secure farm for that Cinderace. That, in my opinion, would reduce the curve of strength, right? It would pull that curve down, meaning that the character's not going to get super fed super fast, and you would then have an attacker that's scaling into the mid and late game a lot slower. So what we have now is we have a Cinderace goes into a game, they get super farmed off jungle, they get some bees. If they get Dreadnought, they're incredibly fed, right? They're level 9, they're level 10, they're going into the mid game super ahead of everybody else, and they just kind of proceed to keep that lead and carry that game for a very long time. And I think that if we could flatten that curve and pull that strength down a little bit, it would make those characters feel a bit more balanced. But it's not that simple, right? And this is where the discussion gets a little bit interesting. Do you remember the most recent buff, the most recent buff to Machamp? Machop actually got a buff to Karate Chop. It was able to do more damage and increase the viability of the laning phase of Machamp. And that was a huge meta-defining change, even to the point where we still are seeing some Machamps being played in the top lane competitively today, or at least it's the only natural second option, at least in the 1-1-3 meta. I would love to see something like that for the AD carries. I would love to see early game buffs for Greninja, Cinderace, Decidueye, and Duraludon, not necessarily each one of them, but early game buffs to help them secure farm and have more of a presence in the laning phase that tapers off into their normal strength. So not something that's going to carry and be crazy strong that is a buff to them as a net buff, but something that's a net buff to their early game specifically. And if you don't like this idea, then let me know your thoughts on the idea of reducing the experience in the jungle, because I think the whole point is that, for me, with the jungle role, there's just one. Like I said, there's only one, and we have an entire class of speedsters that don't really get played that much unless we have 2-1-2 score comp meta with Talonflame in the lane. But we have speedsters as junglers that just don't get played that much. We have a ton of really good all-rounders, in my opinion, that don't really see that much play. We have Aegislash, Serena, Garchomp, Dragonite that really just don't get to see that much play. We have a ton of characters that I feel are just actually more designed and made to be in the jungle, and unfortunately that jungle position is being taken over a lot of the time, not always, like Indy said, a lot of the time by an AD carry. So I would love to hear your thoughts. I think, in my opinion, if the game stays in its current form, it's not the end of the world, just kind of an interesting discussion to bring to the table. I personally have never been a huge fan of having the AD carry Pokemon, the attackers in the jungle. I think it would just be much more fun to have more clear lines on some of the roles where, defenders, supports, and attackers, those go to the lanes. All-rounders and speedsters, those can go to jungle. All-rounders can also go to lane. So it kind of changes the meta a little bit and introduces more opportunities for certain all-rounders and speedsters to see play more consistently. So friends, thank you so much for listening to this video. I definitely do appreciate it. Like I said, drop a like on the video and leave me your thoughts. What do you think about the idea of having attackers not in the jungle at all, buffing their early game? What do you think of the idea of reducing the experience where, maybe they're leaving the jungle at level 4 and they have to work at the first bees at 850 bees to get their level 5, to kind of flatten the curve of jungle in general? That doesn't matter who's in the jungle, to be honest. That could just be a good idea, but I would love to know your thoughts. So as always, be sure to be kind to one another, tell someone that you love them, and I'll see you on the next video.